Hey everyone, we took a little break over the holidays, but now we're back with another episode of We Should Have Recorded That. And boy, do we have some updates.
Sure do. Yeah. Over the holidays, we, had to take time away from the business efforts to, tend to family and friends and things like that. But we continued, despite having those holidays, we continued to work on some things here and there, fitting in different aspects as we could. And, surprisingly, we got done what we needed to get done. So,
How do you feel like you showed up for your business during the holidays, Sissy?
oh man, so it's been a mixed bag because we had some setbacks at the beginning of the month with kids being sick, and that just seemed to linger forever. And then, right as they were well enough to go back to school, school was out for the holiday break. So then I had kids underfoot, which made it a lot more difficult to come sit down in the office and work on some things. And the things that I really had to tackle were getting the paid program set up for the new year. When I initially launched the community, I knew the first few months would be free. I wanted to provide membership for free through the end of the year. But with that new year deadline looming, I had a lot of things that I had to get done. Things like putting together the marketing copy for the promotion of the paid aspect of the community, the premier access, and what those pieces looked like, and putting that same type of marketing copy in several places to help guide people who are either in the existing community or people who would be looking at the community from the outside to kind of funnel them into that paid plan and also present my case as to why that would be a good option for them.
So
So
with your premium membership, have you added any additional features, or are you essentially taking what was once free to get people in the door and now make it paid? What does that look like?
yes. So I'm doing a freemium type model. So I've got the basic community where people can come in, interact, post on the feed, look at some of my posts. And I've got a few other spaces built out that are really kind of just for anyone to come and access. That includes a free e-course on how to get started with a carnivore diet, as well as some other complimentary things like weekly journal prompts, a creativity corner, which was a new thing that I added, and haven't really put too much into that space yet, but it is at least there as something that's available for members. So again, generating some new copy for that space. And then taking the weekly meetings that previously were free and open to all and putting those behind that pay gate. And so now with those weekly meetings that meet 3 times a week, those are now only accessible through the membership space that is accessible only via that paid membership. And then I also added a book club component, which is something I wanted to do from the beginning. I've known that I wanted that to be a part of my community, but it didn't necessarily make sense to have a book club with numbers so small. And also, without it being paid, do I really want to commit to those 2 extra hours a month? So adding in the bi-monthly book club was another thing that, again, I had to generate some more kind of information about what that looks like and structure that on the platform itself. So these things took time, and I definitely had a running checklist of things that had to get done um, in order to pull it all together. So yeah, I added the book club, I added a couple other spaces like that creativity corner, and then ultimately just had to kind of build out the, I guess, marketing materials for all of those and pull them together cohesively, and then set up the plans, the paid plans, so that people actually are able to go and make that purchase and getting, the Stripe payment stuff set up along with that. So lots of little details, and none of it was too overwhelming. It simply took taking time to come sit down and do those tasks. And that was something that I really felt like I was in short supply of with the holiday season, so that was a challenge.
Yeah, I ended up ahead of the holidays because I was going to be traveling out of town, flying somewhere else. I knew I didn't want to bring my laptop to do anything. So I took advantage of a lot of the schedule features on both social media and within the Mighty Networks platform to and I preemptively figured out what our weekly journal prompts were going to be for the community and things like that. I scheduled a couple of podcast episodes to post over the like holiday week. And so I definitely did like a hands-off approach, but at least as far as like
Mhm.
outward facing appearance, there was still new things, going up because I just did them ahead of time and scheduled them out.
Yeah, that's nice.
And then Stephanie and I did put up an announcement on our social media that, per our, in line with our messaging about how it's important to write and then rest, that we were taking kind of a rest week around the holidays, and then we geared back up, the following week with our meetings, but we didn't hold meetings the week of Christmas at all.
Okay.
That
Okay.
was an easy choice for us because at this point, the two of us are the only ones coming to meetings. We don't
Mhm,
have any paid members
mhm,
who would have access to those meetings. So we
mhm,
were still doing all the prompts and everything that goes onto the free side so that they would have access to all of that. And of course the podcast episodes. But
mhm.
as far as like showing up for the meetings, we weren't going to do that when it was just the two of us.
Yeah. Yeah, that is funny you mentioned that. I totally, again, like I just have discounted that area of effort that I've had to put into the community. I did show up for meetings on both Christmas Eve and I believe New Year's Eve. Both those days just happened to fall in line with when I normally held meetings. And I thought about canceling them. I expected low attendance and they were low attendance days. But for those few people who did show up, I felt good about showing up for them and providing that level of consistency. But yeah, I mean, it's kinda tough around holidays. What do you do? Do you cancel? Do you not? What do you expect? And definitely the outcome was, I felt good about being there. I wasn't traveling though either. You took a flight over to go hang out with some family, and that would have been a lot harder of a situation for you to then pull away and go sit down and host an hour-long meeting. And then so I wonder when you were on like away and out of your home element, did you do any kind of planning or brainstorming or thinking, or were you totally out of that mode?
The one thing I did, and I had set this intention before the trip, is I knew I wanted to read a book in Stephanie's writing genre. She writes in contemporary romance and I write in memoir. At least that's what I've done so far. And so I wanted to read one of her favorite authors so I could better understand the genre so that I have you know, can speak a little bit more intelligently when I like give her advice on how she should structure her story or anything. So I'm
Mhm,
speaking with a little bit more like insight and intelligence.
mhm,
Um, and it was kind of the beginning stages of one of our next iterations of a area that we're adding to our community, much like you, is a book club. But it's got a different sort of focus because we're reading books not as a reader, but as a writer. So I was
mhm,
paying attention while I was reading this romance fiction on how the author managed tension and how the author, created problems and then chose to solve them.
mhm,
Um, I also like pay close attention to like the character development and the relationships between the characters and the kinds of actions and dialogue that the writer chose to use in order to get me to buy in, or what was it about these characters, these main characters that I really liked. I was
mhm,
struck by the giftedness of this particular author because I really liked both of the main characters in this in a like fuller bodied sense. Like at no point was I like, oh, why is this character not seeing the value of this other character and they're being stupid and blah blah blah. No,
mhm,
like I understood both of their struggles between their two
mhm,
diverse backgrounds and their worlds. I'm like, oh yeah, he really cares about her, but how is he going to leave this town, small town where he's the mayor, and people rely on him, and then she's, oh my gosh, she's a doctor and her family has this legacy at this hospital and she just applied for the chief job and this is something she's been striving for. Yes, she wants to be with him, but she also wants this too, and it's like
right.
the author did such a great job.
Mhm,
Um, so that was maybe a little too much detail for people, but hey, if you're into that kind of thing, you'll really love the
mhm,
book club.
right.
But that's the kind of thing that I did over the break. And honestly, when I was like actually there, I didn't none of it. I didn't touch the book at
Mhm,
all. But on the flight there, on the flight back, waiting
mhm,
in the airport, that kind of thing, then I was reading.
mhm,
And that's one of those sort of like cheat codes as a writer is you can read and feel like you're working towards your craft.
Yeah, I like that. Well, and also we kind of joke amongst ourselves, even is calling it like our productive downtime. Like we've got to use our downtime to be productive in some way. I feel like,
Hacking that system.
like, okay, we don't really need to be productive all the time. Like it is good to rest, but if we can find a sneaky way to like work something in there, we're somehow going to find a way to do that.
Yeah.
Well, and so I really love that you kind of went away with that intention of supporting Stephanie and kind of gaining a better perspective of your business partner for your community so that those conversations y'all have, that podcasting, video conversations that y'all are having and sharing to kind of generate marketing content is a big component of where y'all's focus is. And then y'all came back and got together and had a business meeting. Y'all fully fleshed out this book club plan, and I mean, I was just blown away as you were talking about the book club and how you're going to look at these different books that while they're interesting on face value as a read, there's something specific to be taken from each one and looking at each book and then dissecting that. And then even we were talking about this, taking it a step further and like turning that into a lesson in an e-course that you're eventually going to be marketing as like an in-app purchase or something for
Right.
existing members. So it just has this great sustainability built into it for, increasing engagement, giving your members real value and entertainment value, and then also helping you create a product that is going to help generate more passive income for you long term. So, and I know y'all talked about a few other things, but do you want to expound a little bit more on that and what y'all covered in that business meeting?
Yeah. So basically, part of our like LLC, operating agreement that we filled out, because if we have an LLC of two people versus just one, we have an operating agreement. And part of that is having an annual business meeting at the beginning of the year.
Mm,
It's also really convenient because we're about 2 months into the like forming of the business and 1 month into like since the launch in early December.
mhm,
So we don't have a ton of time under our belt as far as with the business, but I think it's so important to do some of this assessment early on, make these adjustments early on if things are not, you launched and things didn't pan out exactly how you thought. We had a couple of not surprises, but just areas that we needed to adjust, post launch. So we knew we were not going to launch with all of the different things that we wanted to see in our community. We knew it would
mhm,
take time before we had enough people for a critique group to make sense. And we
mhm,
also wanted to flesh out more of the details of how that was going to function and work.
mhm,
We knew we wanted to have a book club. We
mhm,
knew we wanted to do interviews of other authors and editors and such. And so we took a look at the business meeting at those like more long-term objectives and figured out what would make sense for this year, this coming year, 2024, but
mhm,
also what was like the thing we should do first. So we still have,
mhm,
ambitions and dreams to hopefully start the critique group aspect of it by like middle of the year or maybe even last quarter of the year, depending on membership size.
mhm, mhm,
But book club was sort of one of those things we identified based off of like the things that I shared with you
mhm,
that we could still do it and it would still be worth our time because of the podcast topic generation and the extra content we would build from it.
mhm,
That even if it was just Stephanie and I,
mhm,
we saw the value in going ahead and doing it. We didn't feel like we needed an audience necessarily in order to make those discussions
mhm,
worthwhile. That's the benefit of having a business partner is like you would have to sit and just like talk to yourself, if you were going to do a book club by yourself and lead it, have a just discourse about it.
right.
But because we can, bounce ideas off of each other,
Mhm,
um, that made that one of the things that we wanted to immediately bring on. And
mhm,
as we talked about it, we were just both so excited about what we would gain as writers from doing this.
mhm,
We actually just recorded a podcast episode last night that'll post this next week, talking about the book club ideas, talking about finding books that show the hero's journey so we could understand that general like process and flow and pacing of story.
mhm,
We talked about books that help us discern word choice. So I
mhm,
think we're going to use some of Amanda Gorman's poetry in
mhm,
order to understand word choice because in poetry, you have way less space to capture an idea than you do in a full length novel.
mhm,
We're looking at dialogue and how dialogue helps the reader understand the setting and the character development.
Mhm.
We're looking at tension, especially in like suspense or thriller novels.
Mhm.
And like you said, this first month, what we had decided to do is each read a book in our own genre
Mhm.
and dissect it for, as a writer to look at the patterns and the methodologies and takeaways that we could from for our own genre. So I am rereading Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And already within the first few chapters, I noticed this like 3-sentence structure that she utilized multiple times. And the impact of the way that she formulated this would take a like pivotal emotional moment
Mhm.
and really hit it home and slow the pacing down enough that the
Mhm.
reader is more in it with you because you've like suddenly slowed down the pacing. The reader is paying more attention. It hits harder.
Mhm.
So it adds as sort of an emphasis on a, key emotional moment in a particular story or scene.
Mhm.
And so I went ahead and like broke that down and wrote out the formula that I was noticing and provided some examples and even like a 3 or 4-step process of how to apply it to your own writing, like how to take something you'd previously written, whether that be a journal entry or a previous like portion of a book, whether fiction or nonfiction, and
Mhm.
how to take that moment and dissect it in that way so that you could create that same effect of emphasis and pacing.
Mhm.
So already it's this, book club has proven to be, something that we're gaining a lot from both as individual writers, but also like you mentioned, content creation,
Right.
whether that's, external quick resources that draw people in and see the value, or something we keep behind a paywall or whatever it ends up being.
Mhm. Yeah, I
We're
love that.
looking
As you were telling me about it, I was like, okay, you've got to turn this into, like one of your lessons in your future paid courses because, as you go through and you find these little nuggets, it's like that will provide value. And I love so much that this book club, it's like this next step for y'all. It's like this open door for y'all of, generating content for you for in the now for marketing, but also it's helping you build out the rest of the business. So yeah, and it's kind of nice that we're both like adding in a book club, to our communities in very different ways, but I mean, it's a good way to hook people in, like especially our type of people who are into that personal growth and development. It's a great resource. So that's cool that y'all found a way to make that work.
The other big shift that came out of our business meeting was like a honing or refining of our target audience.
Yes,
So,
please talk about that and expand on that because that was a really good conversation it sounded like that y'all had.
right. So when we started out, we knew that we figured our target audience are writers who are looking to, you know, publish or self-publish something for the first time.
Mhm.
Um, and but the main product that we have at the moment is our time to write accountability sessions.
Mhm.
There's like a morning offering and an evening offering twice a week. So total of 4 sessions, but morning and evening, it's 2 a week. And that is basically a time for someone to show up. We set intentions at the beginning of the meeting. We have some quote or inspiration. Everyone then blacks out their screen, does their own writing for about 40 minutes, and then we
Mhm.
reconvene at the end and have a time for like some feedback, some self-reflection, and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And like I said, right now it's just Stephanie and I attending these, but especially when we do them together, I mean, I get so much out of it. I have seen improvements in my own writing and how often I show up to do my own writing. And then the
Mhm.
times that we are meeting together, I've also gotten really valuable feedback from her when I've said, well, I worked on this. And then at the end, I kind of hit this bump and I'm not sure how to do that. And she would give me a suggestion. I'm like, great, that's where I'm going with it. Or,
Right.
she was saying that she was going to blow up one of her characters. She originally was planning to have like a boyfriend before the main character meets the new love interest, but now she's decided that's too messy and she's not going to have it be a boyfriend because to convince the reader that this relationship was valuable enough to move across the country for, but then also immediately ends within the first few chapters just felt like a lot of heavy lifting for a first time writer. So she's made some smart choices to go ahead and adjust that. And I
Mm-hmm.
helped her brainstorm, like recently deceased parent
Mm-hmm.
scenario as to why this character may want to temporarily leave. Maybe this is just a short term gig
Mm-hmm.
that she's taking or whatever in order to earn a promotion, and she needs a break from her old town, and
Mm-hmm.
you know. So it's
Yeah.
been really cool to benefit from that. And so when Stephanie brought up the idea of refining our target audience, she was originally thinking along the lines of picking a particular genre that we focused on.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the value in refining our target audience so that we can really curate the marketing and the messaging. But
Mm-hmm.
I saw it as being someone in a particular stage of the writing process
Yeah.
versus a genre, because we
Yeah.
aren't really developing much genre specific content yet.
Mm-hmm.
But what we are really harping on and benefiting people for is people who already have ideas and already have like the project they want to work on, and they're
Mm-hmm.
either in the outlining, the
Mm-hmm.
writing, or the editing stage.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we would like to be a place that helps, people go from, a fully fleshed edited work to publishing, we
Mm-hmm.
are not there yet. That is
Not
not
yet.
the resources that we
Mm-hmm.
offer yet.
Mm-hmm.
So what we want to do is really focus our target audience being the people who are in the same spot we are, where Stephanie's going from outline to writing, I'm going from writing to editing. And
Mm-hmm.
when we as individuals get to that publishing stage, I'm sure we'll have resources because we will be there too.
Right.
But for now, we've recognized the need to really refine our target audience
Mm-hmm.
so that we're pushing out the content that's going to make the most sense for those people, because
Right.
that's who we really can support right now, and that's who we
Right.
really want to see. We want fellow writers and they're writing with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was really valuable how y'all nailed that down. And I love that you backed away from just picking a specific genre and instead went towards we're looking for people who have their idea, they have their project, they just need that accountability piece. And that's what y'all offer the most of at this point. But again, that will lend itself to building out other elements of your community in the future. Like you've got to get more butts in the seat before you can have a critique group. You need
Right.
enough people actively showing up and engaging in their writing for you to have anything for anyone to critique and then to get that feedback from others. So it totally makes sense. And I really like that y'all took that time to work on your ideal person. And I think they call it even like your avatar. Have you heard that terminology before?
Oh, that sounds so impersonal.
It's so strange, but yeah, you're supposed to come up I don't fully understand, but it's like you try and come up with your ideal person and you can even break it down to like 2 or 3 different avatars, but like this embodiment of this person that you're directly trying to speak to in your marketing. But when you have that crystal clear focus, it's a lot easier to know where to go as opposed to casting a huge wide net. Instead, target something specific and go for those folks.
I'm recalling you actually having a freak out not too long ago about your target audience,
Yeah.
and us talking about how maybe it's the hormonal
Mhm.
imbalances
Yeah.
that is right for you. I think it might have been when you saw some other communities going up or
Mhm.
something, and you were feeling some of that fear coming back about the sense of competition.
Right, right. Yeah, it could have been when there's another emerging community that focuses on sugar addiction. And then there was another one I saw that popped up like communities are popping up, y'all get on board.
Right.
There was another one, and she is a more widely known doctor in the space. Like she's gonna have no problem getting people. She's already got that wide following. But and hers is carnivore, and I think hers was talking about carb addiction is how she phrased hers instead of sugar addiction, kind of same thing. But um still I was kind of wondering, do I need to be reaching out? And I even had a conversation with my husband Brett. I was talking about how I'm not sure what to say in these Instagram posts and like YouTube videos, etc. If I should just be sharing my story. And I realized that I'm operating under this mindset of I need to reach people I need to reach the other people that aren't already being targeted, because there are folks who they're new to carnivore, they're interested, and they find these other top 5 to 10 people first. But that's kind of operating in that scarcity mindset, that limiting belief mindset of, oh, why can't they find me first? Or why can't I be one of the people they stumble across first?
That's what we were talking about. We were talking about
Yeah.
how to find those women who would be ready to make the changes,
Yeah.
have the ability to make the, like, commitment both financially and time-wise to the hormonal changes. Because as much as we love the postpartum moms, effing leave
Right.
them alone for a minute, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Like,
Give
they
them some
don't have
breathing
time
room.
for the meetings.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so, yeah, we were talking about how you bring so much value because you are really focused on that personal development piece and the habit forming.
Mhm.
Whereas some of these other communities are going to be attracting people who have like already like dabbled in some of this, either carnivore already, and they're just looking to like prime and I forget all the
Mhm.
terminology. I was gonna say
Prime
purge.
feasting,
That wasn't
fasting. I
right.
know they're trying to level up, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. um, and so other existing communities that are related to your carnivore community but aren't carnivore. It's like why compete for this small group of currently carnivore people,
Mhm.
especially when what you present, especially with your like your how to get started
Mhm.
and the, how to find your why, how to start a new habit, what
Mhm.
to buy at the grocery store. Like you really cater to the newbies. And so it's
Right.
like finding those people who potentially would be interested, but maybe just haven't had exposure
Mhm.
to the science behind it, to that there's even like this whole way of eating that people even eat this way.
Right. Yeah, because when you first hear about it, you're like, "What? No way, people don't do that. That can't be possible." But I was at one point that person who was actively looking for answers, and Google just wasn't cutting it. Like that was Google was not showing me how to heal my hormones. It was not showing me how to, mitigate my anxiety and depression through diet. Like I didn't know that those were things that were possible. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I've been knowing I need to focus my efforts. I would love to say I've been focusing my efforts there, but I haven't. I haven't really gotten back into that marketing piece because, like we mentioned, just getting through December was about checking those boxes of those specific tasks I had to do in order to get things set up for January. So I really wasn't able slash did not prioritize doing those other types of marketing, reaching out to those groups. But I've definitely been thinking about that in the background of these other things. Another thing that I really kind of had to wrestle with over the last few weeks was as I'm setting up this paid plan is how much do I charge?
Mm,
So I went through, we've talked about it before so much, but then I went through one night in my journal and I'm like listing out all these things. I'm like, oh yeah, this is so worth it. And what I'm going to say, and I'm like, okay, I finally land on I should charge $37, a month for people. And I believe that's firmly reasonable. Essentially they're getting small group coaching. There's a lot of resources. It's 3 times a week plus extra, kind of discussion groups and stuff. It's definitely well within that asking price.
mm,
And I am curious to know how I will look back on this decision in the next 6 to 8 months. But as I was doing the setting up the paid plan, I set it all up. I had a price point of $37. I had a little snafu. I had to go back, redo stuff. And then when I set the price that second time, like after having seen what that $37 looked like on the screen on the final, like click here to pay, I felt uneasy. And so I ended up changing it to $30 a month. So that I could say things like for less than $1 a day. And also because I know from experience that is a market proven price point that works because that's how much it was in the paid community I was in previously. And even though I believe and I know there is value that meets or exceeds the $37 I'm asking, I'm a new business owner and like I'm looking at this bank statement that's just like showing all these outgoing expenses and I'm like I can't afford to be, like the top creme de la creme price point right now. I've got to get people in. I've got to get some kind of income. So I did compromise in what I had chosen for myself as my price point,
Mhm.
which I find interesting. And there's probably more to that in my own, like, mental capacity and limiting beliefs, etc. But I did end up going with that $30 price point. And because that was such a tough decision and I wrestled with that for weeks leading up to it, I just feel like it's really important to talk about here because that I agonized over what to charge because
You were all over the place. I mean, for the whole discussion, I mean, at one point you were much lower than that, and then,
Mhm.
at one point you were talking like 40,
Yep.
40 plus,
Mhm.
and then yeah, and then you sort of like the pendulum kind of like swung until it settled right there at 30, which
Exactly.
makes sense. And the thing is, I remember we talked about this, off off of the podcast,
I know, right?
that,
Should have recorded that.
you have the ability to change your price. It's not set in stone. There's a, you are to when we are pricing these things, we are trying to take into account that people don't love when prices change.
Mhm.
So, you don't want to set a price so low that then like 2 months later you're upping it because you
Mhm.
undervalued yourself.
Yeah.
But there's also this understanding that you're going to be adding more content. So at some point, it's going to be worth even more than that. So it's like, sure, maybe the price is a little bit more than what you currently have there. But
Mhm.
if you know that you're going to be adding a bunch of stuff within the next month or two, then
Mhm.
why not price it for that? For example, Stephanie and I knew we were launching ours with just the like chat feature, the weekly writing prompts, and those
Mhm.
meetings, you
Mhm.
know? And we set our price, knowing that we were going to be adding a book club soon, knowing that we were going to start doing interviews. It's like, yes, that's not here right now. We know we're building out course content behind the scenes that's not available yet,
Mhm.
but we know what's coming and we know what it's worth. So we were trying to find that sweet spot between like not just charging for what we felt like we currently offered,
Mhm.
um, but also for the, short-term growth that we know we're gonna be putting in additional resources into the business. And
Right.
ultimately what we found, since we were setting our price before ever like starting, we didn't do a like totally free series like you
Mhm.
did. We found that so much value in our time to write sessions for ourselves as individuals that we're like, yeah, this is already worth what we set it at. We're fine. I have no issue saying that this is what it's going to cost you. And when you
Mhm.
calculate what that is like for the month, like it's so worth it. You're going to
Mhm.
instantly see the value.
Yeah.
Now it's interesting because you started free and now you've gotten paid.
Yeah.
We started paid and we've decided to do a free month
Mhm.
just in January. Part of that is because we don't have any paid members yet, and we would love to
Mhm.
have people in our meetings. It'll make it
Right.
more enjoyable for us.
Mhm.
But also January is when people set those intentions for the new year, those New Year's resolutions and things. We were trying originally with the launch to kind of piggyback off of National Novel Writing Month, which happens in November every year. But that does put you right in the smack dab of like holiday season, right?
Mhm.
So maybe people aren't looking for that to start writing their book, at that time.
Right.
So we've kind of gone the flip flop of you. So it'll be interesting for people, listening to this, down the road to see, did both methods work? Was one, ideal over another? Can you really even tell?
Mhm.
Um, because there is that risk anytime you value anything at free,
Mhm.
are people going to then understand the value when you start charging for that same thing?
Yes.
Can you
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit? Because you
Yeah, we
struggled with that
should.
part too.
Okay, that's the next part. So, and that was another big factor in me trying to decide a price point because I had active members who were coming to these meetings, who were showing up, who were engaging, and I'm so appreciative to them because without them, what's the point of these meetings? I don't have a partner where I've got that accountability piece built in. So, I really was struggling with the idea of, okay, what if all of a sudden I charge for this membership in January that people have come to expect as free? And what if no one is willing to pay it? What if my community that's already small but consists of, about like 6 or 7 active members who will come to meetings and talk and share? what if it drops down to worst case scenario, absolutely zero, and there's crickets, and all of a sudden I'm like back to rebuilding a community. And then also like, I don't know if I could handle that fear of rejection, that like people really don't find enough value to pay the $30 a month to come to meetings that otherwise they were coming to. So I really kind of wrestle with that. And I finally decided, look, I am going to give my active members, so, and I define that as anyone who has attended a live meeting, free membership. And I made it free membership for life, mostly because I don't know how to make a plan otherwise. But I still decided it is more worth it to me to make sure I have a community so that when paying members show up, they have a community that they're coming into. Because as we've talked about on this podcast before, I'm not the product. I mean, I'm part of it, honestly, with this group coaching, kind of stuff, but I'm not the product. The community is the product. And you cannot have a community with one single person. So I decided that it was worth it to me to turn around and offer that membership to anyone who had been active in a meeting. And they were all very grateful. Most of them joined. There's a couple, I think maybe they joined early on, and I don't think they're necessarily still actively checking in on the platform. That's fine. But the ones that I was hoping to be able to retain, I retained. And they also expressed a sense of gratitude at being able to stick in and have these meetings. And so in a way, I've almost built up a level of, member loyalty that I didn't really expect out of this. I was hoping maybe, oh, they'd want to continue to show up to meetings, but I really do feel like it's kind of helped create a culture in my community of people who value my time, value my advice, if you want to call it that, or just my knowledge. And so that's been really good and beneficial for me personally, knowing that people do want to stick around. But I did feel like I needed to make some of that access free for others, because I can't wait for people to pay to have a community that then other paying people come into and look around and see that no one's there. That makes sense. So yeah, that was a
And you
big part
created
for
a
me.
little system of leverage too, in the sense that like you've given these handful of people free
Yeah.
membership, right?
Maybe, yeah.
And now you can ask them like, please post how beneficial this community is to you. And you don't have to feel any sort of guilt about asking for that, because you already know what you're giving them. It's already in writing, like this is the value you are getting for free.
Mhm.
So you do have some sort of built-in like advocates, right?
Yeah,
And I
definitely.
know you had also mentioned the other part too, not just having people there for when other people join, but it's important too to have people there who are a little bit further on the path,
Mhm.
right? So you
Yeah.
now have this group of people, and most of these people are newer to carnivore, but now you've got a little bit more of like a staggered start, which I
Mhm.
think is helpful. It's
Yes.
what's, certainly beneficial in my community, because Stephanie has a published book. I'm editing a book. She's writing a book. So
Mhm.
between the two of us, we are currently covering like 3 different like steps of the process.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's helpful too. And that's essentially what you've created, is by retaining this core membership group,
Mhm.
you have essentially made sure that you always have some people that are a little bit further along than any newbies that you attract.
Yeah. And I will say in yesterday's meeting, it was on full display. So in yesterday's meeting, I had 4 members plus myself. So 5 people were in this meeting. And truthfully, that's the most members that we have had at any point in time. I think there's been 1 or 2 other occasions where there've been 5 people, including myself, in the Zoom room. And the conversation was great. Everyone kind of was able to share. Like you said, there were people at different stages. There's one girl healing from chronic illness. She's now like a year into her recovery journey. There's another carnivore who actually came from, we met through the previous community I was a part of. So she's been carnivore about the same time as me. And then we have a few newer folks, one who started in April, one who is still kind of dabbling with this animal-based eating. She really is, she's not strict carnivore, and she's not quite sure she's ready to go there yet, but still having everyone at those different places lend their voice to the conversation was really helpful, really powerful. And I think by the end, the girl who is, like kind of on the fence about it, she's like, I think this is what I need to do. And we're like, yes, like that's what we're here for. But it's cool to see that dynamic in action. And I felt so validated after yesterday's meeting that yes, what we're doing here is important, and that that community piece is so key for people's success. And also just, knowing that these people are still showing up. They don't have to. I didn't make it, a condition. Hey, if you accept this membership, you'll only retain it as long as you show up to this many meetings. It was no strings attached, just my gift to them, thanking them for being part of these early stages of building community. And so it was on full display yesterday, which came at a time where I kind of needed that. So I was very, very thankful to see that.
Right. And Stephanie and I have built in that a little bit. It's not going from free to staying free, but
Mm.
we've sort of established without disclosing a timeline that the current rate is a founding member rate, and you can lock in that rate for the entirety of your membership. But
Mhm.
that implies that at some point we're going to be raising rates. And so it's like, if you get in early, you will be sort of thanked as a thank you gift. We will lock in your rate. You won't ever pay more,
Right.
and it's kind of in a sense this similar to what you've been doing.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm interested what you sort of hope what your vision is long term for your book club. What do you hope that that brings to the community? What kind of like engagement are you looking for, and like what does that add?
Yeah. So for my group, obviously in the meetings, the weekly meetings, we're talking all things carnivore, like diet, day to day, that sort of stuff. But there is and we always welcome conversation about the personal growth development piece. But sometimes that's a little harder to get into in some of those meetings when we're having to address just like, daily eating habits, etc. So in the book clubs, we are picking books that are nonfiction based books that are in the like self-help, discovery, personal growth genre. So for January, we're starting with a classic, Atomic Habits by James Clear. So really harnessing that New Year's, energy and momentum, setting habits. And so we're looking at books that can help us improve our habits, our mindsets, and our lifestyle. And really just whether people read the book or not, those conversations then allow us to branch into that part of life that is more focused on the personal growth and development and not just so diet focused. Because while it is very important, especially for folks coming into this new way of eating, to have accurate, clear information about the details of what to eat, there is this other piece that occurs alongside that lifestyle transformation that is really structured on your personal growth and development. Like, and if you don't tend to it, it can rear its ugly head. And I know from personal experience, like you can feel supported in your diet, but not supported in the personal growth piece. And that leads to a disconnect. So, having felt that myself personally, I want to avoid that. And I want people in my community to feel held. And I want to make sure that we're providing a space for those specific conversations. And doing that through the lens of the book takes some pressure off of, having to, dive in deep personal stories, maybe revealing vulnerabilities that you're really not comfortable sharing yet. So it kind of gives us a way to work through some of that and gives us common language, as more and more people join and, we all kind of read similar books. It gives us a good foundation, and it also helps build the culture in the community around these same kinds of ideas and just gives us more of a shared framework to go off of. So ultimately for me, that book club piece is about giving us another space to work on the personal growth, but also develop those connections between community members, and then to help create that wider culture, and that shared language and that shared experience, as we continue throughout the year in our journeys together.
Will you use any of that to do any like forward-facing marketing content, whether that's just you talking about reading the book or your takeaways from reading the book or any portion of like the recorded Zoom conversations? Or will
I
it
think
all be
so.
behind the paywall?
Um, Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, I will definitely talk about the fact that we have the book club. I will, perhaps highlight some key things in my own stuff. However, I do feel really strongly that what is said in those meetings is for the people in those meetings. And, I do post the playbacks for others who aren't able to join, but I really don't feel comfortable sharing what others share in those meetings with anyone in a wider audience for marketing purposes. And so I may go back and take clips of things that I say in those meetings, and share that as promotional marketing materials. But I do not see myself ever using like the back and forth conversation pieces or people's specific issues as my own kind of fodder for marketing. Um, but you know, I definitely do want to make it known that we're hosting a book club, because that was actually something that was started in a community I was a part of before, and it, you know, they had a much wider, you know, membership base, and folks really enjoyed that. But their books were all focused on, you know, way of eating, and, you know, like the diet health specific books,
Mhm.
usually written by people in the space already. Whereas I want to make sure we're bringing in other, you know, perspectives and opinions and whatnot, and kind of rounding out that picture, not just focusing on diet. Um,
Right.
yeah,
Very cool. Well, I think both of us have some exciting things to look forward to with our businesses this year, and it's cool to see how even in their infancy, we're already starting to make some of these tweaks and adjustments wherever we feel like we need it. And oh my gosh, I feel like I'm just learning so much.
constantly, right? I mean, it's constant. So, yeah, we're the queens of the pivot. We got to be ready to pivot. And so, you know, it's you try things out for a little bit, you see how it goes, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you get there. And that's just part of it, one foot in front of the other. And that's kind of been the theme of the month, is just get it done, knock it down one at a time. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's all you can do, really.
Well, this has been a great one. I do think this is part one of part two. So we'll probably end this recording and we'll go start a part two that goes a little bit more into our own personal growth pieces over the last few weeks, because whoo, it's been a whirlwind. But this was a good one for kind of recapping the business approach and kind of the steps we've had to take on a more tangible level with building out our communities for the last month or so.
All right. Well, talk to you soon, Sissy.
All right, glad we recorded this one. Bye, Susie.